You're listening to the OCD Stories podcast, hosted by me, Stuart Ralph. The OCD Stories is a podcast dedicated to raising awareness and understanding around obsessive-compulsive symptoms. I do this through interviewing inspired therapists, psychologists, and people who have experienced OCD. Welcome to the OCD Stories. In this episode, we discuss what goes on behind the scenes of an OCD clinic, how the NBI team work together, what an average day looks like, how the clinic operates, and so much more. So if you wanted to get an understanding of behind the scenes of an OCD clinic, hopefully this episode does that for you and answers some questions. So thank you so much to NBI for supporting our work, and thank you so much to you guys for listening as always. I hope this special midweek episode of the podcast is enjoyable. And these midweek special episodes, which go out at the end of the month on a Wednesday, are made possible by and in partnership with the Neurobehavioral Institute in Florida, or NBI for short. I will be interviewing different members of their clinical team on a range of topics. NBI specialise in treatment and programs for anxiety, OCD, comorbidities, and complex cases. They also offer an intensive outpatient program and a residential program called the NBI Ranch, a supportive living experience that complements intensive treatment for anxiety and obsessive-compulsive related disorders. To find out more about their intensive outpatient services or the NBI Ranch, as well as to read some of their free information online about OCD via their blog, visit nbiwestern.com. And without further ado, here is Dr. Jonathan Hoffman and Dr. Katia Moritz. Welcome back to the show, Katia and John.
Thank you. Thank you for having us again.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. So today we're going to talk about how the sausage is made behind the scenes of a OCD treatment center. Is there a place you guys want to start, or shall I jump? Actually, I'll ask a question. And if you think there's a different place, you guys ask it. So I guess I'm curious about keep it very general to start with, like the day-to-day vibes of NBI Western, like what does it look like, teamwork, meetings, client sessions, all of that stuff.
John, do you want me to go ahead?
Please.
Yeah. So a lot of time and thought goes into what we need to do and how we need to do it. So there's more time behind the scenes than time with the patient, which I know sounds really crazy, but the number of meetings and connections and communications that have to happen are so intense. Every day is an intense day because if you want to work in a collaborative team, it's also setting up a team playing all day long. So if you think of a sports team, they practice and then they go to the game and they play for an hour, 2 hours, let's say baseball, 3 hours, whatever it is. We are playing the game all day. And there's very little time to rehearse, very little time to prepare, for the game. And so every day we need to prepare and go. So we start the day with a quick meeting. Then we go on to doing different groups and sessions, and just the scheduling alone is really logistics. I think I would love to go to Amazon and ask how they deliver so many packages, because we struggle to do that a lot. And then right away we meet again. So every day there is a consultant in the team, and we work with them, and we even have people that are not at NBI full-time, but that we have over the years built this consulting relationship just to bring in ideas from the outside. So Dr. David Tolan meets with our team every Monday for a long time now. And that's, one example. Dr. Sandra Marshall does for testing. So we bring other people in because we feel like the value of a clinic is intellectual property. So the more we build that communication, that thought process, the better the services are going to be. So that part is actually cool. We meet every day, sometimes 2 hours a day. So at 10:30, everybody stops and there's consultation. And then at 12 o'clock, Some people go for supervision. We do peer supervision. We do postdoctoral supervision. And then we do also do every Thursday a specific training. So every month it's the topic of the month, and we really dive really deep into that topic. And every Thursday there's a training. We invite colleagues from the outside to come and do the training. Some of the trainings we do internally. And then, we have to use technology to really communicate. So every patient has, not only the electronic health record, they have a whole, side communication, a log of communication that is on fire. So your phone is blasting like all the time. You need to look at it. I would say like it's similar more to an emergency room than a hospital in a way, because there is constant talk. This one said this one did that. Did anybody see this? Did you guys notice this? So there's so much interaction going on, and that is very difficult to manage. I have to tell you, I find it very difficult to manage. John, what do you think?
Well, I think it's funny. We've come to that point where Katia is giving sports analogies, which I find a recent development.
30 years working with you, John.
I'm finding pretty fascinating, actually, to listen to, but I think it's true. But I would say it's not organized sports. It's more like street ball. And I was thinking, as Katia was speaking, I was thinking about a lot of, my own associations to this. And I was thinking, it's like, I was watching the show about the way they play, you call football, soccer in the United States. In Italy, that's not quite a soccer game, because I think the players can actually assault. In Florence or something, like this ancient form of soccer where it looks like assault in a way. And I was thinking about street ball, like you think you're playing an organized game, but it's not so organized. And there's lots of things that go beyond the rules. And I think sometimes it reminds me, if anything, in a sport about street ball. And I was also thinking about the ideas that we plan and plan and plan. But as they say, the plan lasts until you meet the fray. So we actually have to be very dialectical about it. We have to have strategies that we plan, we're considered, we come up with strategies, but things happen that are totally, totally unpredictable every single day, every single minute. And, we're simultaneously planning and playing at the same time too, which really keeps us on our toes. But it's not a sport for everybody. But we somehow have gravitated to the fact that our particular clinic actually has kind of nurtured this way of playing, practicing and playing and practicing and playing all at the same time. And that's the evolution of a lot of years of working together, that we can kind of go from one thing to the other in that way. But it is kind of like it's really kind of a fascinating interplay. Yesterday I had my to-do list and my plan for the morning, and then all of a sudden something went wrong with one of our care plans. And I had to just sit down, and it was unexpected. I had to write it, make sure it went out on time, and make sure everybody understood what it was and how everything was going to work. And then you have to just kind of play catch up the rest of the day. So it's very dynamic. It's interesting. It's very thoughtful and very dynamic all at the same time.
And do you guys, how do you find that? I know Katia kind of said maybe it's a bit, she didn't say, I don't think you said stressful, Katia, but how do you guys find that? Because I can imagine for some people that almost juggling was the word that came to mind. Juggling act might be quite a lot, or do you guys enjoy that?
Well, that's a great question. Yeah. And I'm reminded of, I was listening to some business leaders, and they were saying, well, how do you manage all these companies, all these employees? It's a huge business. And they did kind of make the analogy to juggling. That, well, first we could only kind of throw up a ball. Then we learned to juggle 2. Then we learned to juggle 3. And we learned to juggle a lot of things at the same time. But you need to practice juggling a lot. And that actually is hard, because when we have in our postdoc program and younger staff, they actually are just learning how to juggle. So we have to kind of step in and train the juggling. And sometimes we drop the balls, and how do you kind of recover on stage that even if you've been juggling a long time, something falls down, or you miss something, or you decide to juggle with something maybe you shouldn't juggle with, and all of these ways of thinking are really, really important. So we have to, I'll add another element, as we're doing all of the things that we need to do for the benefit of our patients and families we work with, we have to be training our staff, especially our residents and younger staff, to be actually in the juggling world. So a lot of things, that's what I meant about it being dynamic. A lot of things are going on all at the same time.
I think, Stu, it's not for everyone, right? I think that, it's not for everyone. It is a section of the work that we do. So it's very different than I'm seeing a patient, I'm seeing a second patient of the day, a third patient of the day, and it's a pace, right? For us, and to be honest, Rick, yeah, I think we've done that in our careers, long careers. We've done that for 20 some years, and then I think both of us always had this bigger link connection to those that others are struggling to service, those that need that collaboration, that group, that intensity. And I maybe, a little bit, John is a little more Zen than I am in that sense, where, he was always the one like, have a great pace. I'm an interventionist by nature. I've never enjoyed sticking with the aftercare for a long time. It's a funny feeling, and you have that as a clinician as well. You have a feeling for your patient that is different than for anyone else. I mean, I'm going to be honest about that. Like, I have a love for my patients and their families. It is different, and I even make a little bit of maybe I call a Freudian slip, but we are behaviorists here. But I call them my kids when they, younger patients or young adults, my kids, and people like, oh, your children, and it's like no, I refer them a lot as my kids, and I feel that way. Like, you have that beautiful connection, and the care that you have, and to me that doesn't imply that we are in their lives doing sessions for the rest of their lives. It means that in one moment we touched their lives and did something really special with them. And to me, they are really, really forever mine, right? In a way, I feel responsible. And so I think that if I look at what we do, like, the best time of my week is texts and emails popping up from people that we've treated, a parent, on LinkedIn that sends you a message saying, I just want to tell you what blah, blah, blah has been doing. And literally it brings a tear to my eye every time. I'm like, now it's all worth it, right? So this life on the hustle of the care, it's you could say it is exhausting, but if you talk to an emergency room doctor and say, do you want to sit at a clinic and just do a consultation at a time, they'll be like, no, this is what I was made to do. So I think that we were made to come into people's lives and really impact in a partnership, right? So the partnership between us, our clinicians, and these families, and impact those lives and have this connection moving forward. So I think we take a lot of pride in what happens next, right? So one of our patients becomes an advocate, or, we have a few of our patients that are in their residency after medical school, or just got into a medical school, or got married and had a baby. And so to us, like, that's the aftermath. And so that aftermath keep us really connected with the day-to-day of like, all right, nothing matters. What do we need to do? Do we need to take this kid to blah, blah, blah? Do we need to go with this adult to their job? Do we need to show up at their house and stay there and say, you're coming out of your room? So that kind of outcome makes you feel like the moment that nothing matters, that you have to do whatever it takes. And that's the danger of what we do, is that at that moment, you want to measure being you don't want to be a superhero. You are a clinician. So, but at the same time, there's a life in front of you. And it becomes all in, so that's why it takes so much logistics and conversation and intellectual property to kind of crack that code to get into someone's life that is struggling. Because, what is the moment where you can actually get someone from where they are to where they want to be? What does it take? And sometimes it's not just volition. It's not like the person talking about it. You actually need to go there and help them. If someone is in a deep hole, you could tell them to climb. They can't climb up. They don't have the legs. They can't, there's no leverage. And having to go and pull them out becomes your job. But with that, it comes a lot of stress and responsibility, but an enormous joy at the end. So you have to balance those things out. Otherwise, if you don't feel that way, that's not the job for you, right? I mean, that shouldn't be for everyone, because that's a very specific thing. But I'll tell you, you know, and John will speak for himself. But I mean, there is nothing I love more than the opportunity to actually touch a life and make that partnership. And when that partnership works, when the family and you come together and really have a solid plan, and you guys execute a very difficult plan, and you see the outcome, that's where then you are caught on that. You can't get out.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, good way of putting it. And I agree. Kind of fair. Sometimes it's, I don't know if it's frowned upon. Maybe I've picked up indirectly that therapy is, well, I guess what I want to say is therapy is love. That's how I've looked at it. One of my early lecturers, that's how they sold it to me, was what, if we boil it down, what we're doing is we're loving on our clients. We're giving them that love. And I've always liked that view of therapy.
Yeah, but
I think that that's a very interesting thing. But if you look at the way they describe categories of love, they go all from crazy love to social love to companionate love to all these different forms. And I think we have to be kind of careful if we think in those terms. Like, what kind of love is it? Is it a healthy love? Is it a boundaries love? And we're always toggling back and forth between the caring about what we do intensely and actually being dispassionate enough to be professionals about it and trying to find that balance. But another thing I want to add is that, as I think about it, and this is something I'm going to be, Ethan Smith and I are going to be talking about this at the IOCDF conference this year in San Francisco. We're trying to create aha moments, that moment of change. And sometimes that moment of change comes from a lot of positive and a lot of really, showing a lot of concern and caring, getting involved. And sometimes that positive and that aha moment comes from something that doesn't seem so positive. It comes from really trying to play hardball, really trying to use strategic pressure. But all of these things that we do, and sometimes they are openly obvious to the families and patients we're working with. Sometimes they don't know where we're coming from. We go back to a sports metaphor. We're throwing a curveball at them, or we're just not saying, hey, we're not playing today, or something like that. We're trying to create in all sorts of ways. And that's between Katia and myself too, because as she said, we might look at this very differently. Like it's like having two chefs that say more sauce, less sauce. Put on this spice. No, that's going to make someone sick. And just trying to find between this dynamic tension, the moment where someone says, "Okay, I get it." And every person, every family is different. Again, go back to our juggling. It's like juggling, and sometimes people throwing tomatoes at you. And you have to just kind of keep juggling, and sometimes, you're juggling the flaming bowling balls or whatever they're doing, and we're catching on fire too. And so we have to watch out for all of these elements. But on the one hand, it's really, really fascinating and engrossing. On the other hand, just as you said, we have to make sure that the factory is healthy, and for ourselves too. And that's why we spend so much time really working on the health. It's actually one of our core values. Working on the health and helping our staff and hopefully ourselves live healthy lives so that we're in a position to do this job and do this function and bring this level of caring and engagement, at the same time professionalism, all of these very difficult things all at once.
Yeah, right. Excellent. So what I wanted to ask was, people might not be clear on, what, I guess, levels of care. So you've got like general private practices, clinic, which is where you guys are at, and then you got sort of hospital inpatient level. So how do you define what you guys do compared to, say, a general private practice? And
we live in a funny world. Katia, why don't you explain it? We live in a very funny niche in between, at the intersection of all of those things in a very interesting way, which is kind of an expanding kind of a niche. It really is a good word, because we've learned to proliferate and function within a niche that's that combines a lot of the elements of all, but is somewhat different as well. But
Yes.
Dr. Go ahead.
Yeah. So as we work with very complex cases and some very severe cases and people struggling, we struggled with them. It's really difficult, and I think that for people who have never lived through a real severe case, I think they're shocked to see the suffering, the pain, the difficulty, the stuckness, the physiology, of OCD, and anxiety, and it's such a devastating condition, and it just saddens you to see how challenging it is and how minimized it is by others, not realizing how terrible the condition can actually become at this severe level. And but also we realized that general hospitalization was a terrible answer for patients. So they could be struggling so terribly, so bad. And if you go and send them to the hospital for stabilization, they had the craziest experiences. They would be receiving exactly the opposite of the care that they need. It's people reassuring and doing all kinds of things that make them sicker. And by and large, I mean, if you talk to any of the families that had to hospitalize their loved ones in, stabilization, hospitalization, they will tell you that not only was a terrible experience, but they actually have long-term, issues from it, some even PTSD. From it, because it was such a terrible experience for them, and it doesn't fit the mold. It doesn't make sense, right? So for us, we always had this feeling that there are people who, and then there was thankfully when McLean started their program, and we had that option. We used to many years ago, probably in the late 90s, we had a program, mid 90s, I think, in New York, where we used to use a eating disorder facility program, and we used to have our patients there. We used to run the patients through kind of a combined program. But what we recognize that there is this in-between group of people who on their own, with the support of their clinicians, can't really make the gains that they need. And they don't need to be in a hospital setting where they are not needing, 24-hour shots and injections and that care. And also the residential programs that are more hospital-based, they have a different model. And so for us, the concept was where we kind of land was the people that needed to learn to live their lives. They were struggling to live life because of OCD, and OCD kind of like arrested their development too. So that we needed to intervene on both areas, where is, emotional, social, personal growth, kind of learning to enjoy life again, like really knowing how to have fun, make friends, cook your food, go to dinner. And even if they're not staying with us residentially, that those things were focused for us. A lot of like pre-college, right? So one of my biggest fears as a mom who my 3 kids just went through the process of going to college, is that college failure that we experienced. So, significantly when it comes like to October in our clinic is crazy. The number of kids that went to college, thought they're going to be fine, and then came right back in a very disappointing, way. So like the college boot camp preparation, how do you prepare to go to college? How do you manage? Because sometimes kids are managing their symptoms because they have a parent like watching over and being their executive function and making sure they show up on time. They go to school, they do their work. Once that support is removed, some of them crumble pretty badly. And it's a terrible, terrible experience. And it's a funny thing that the families don't see that's coming. They feel like, they don't notice how much support they've been giving. It's almost like someone who with a broken leg that you keep carrying, and then you just leave them there. And all of a sudden they can't walk, right? And so to me, that kind of patient didn't need to be in a hospital, but they needed to be prepared. And so going to your sessions once or twice or 3 times a week did not cut it, because you need more than that. You need to get more executive function training. You need to figure out how your brain is working. You need to learn how to get yourself fed, and you need to get yourself up, and you need to get your work done on your own. And so there was so much more to OCD treatment that you couldn't provide as an individual clinician. And that's what I love so much about the model of having that team support. Because you do have, like, I'm not good at, John will attest to that. I'm not an executive function person. I probably need help with executive function. So it would be interesting as a clinician, I can teach someone executive function, but someone who really knows the behaviors in and outs of it and could add that to the treatment makes it a big difference. So what it is like bringing it in, everything you need in one kind of concept, and providing that. So I think that's really the difference. And so it is instead of residential is life. Residential is, I have you. I'm going to take care of you right now. We're going to teach you some skills, and then you go back to life. I think that the best is really, instead of residential, is being in life. Like, so you are in life, but we are here with you all day trying to help you be in life. And then eventually I'll let you go a little bit at a time. And then eventually you catch traction and your life goes on. And that's how I think we think of our program.
And I think of it in a way that we are actually, OCD isn't one thing. It's not just a medical or biological thing. It's not just physical. It's not just the psychological symptoms. It has so many layers to it. And from our perspective, I think that we actually try to create a comprehensive approach to OCD that includes all of those elements, that includes all of those layers, because you can't just think of OCD as kind of a medical diagnosis, because it's kind of a weird one if it is, whereas the most severe patients may not actually do well in a hospital for the reasons that Katia was saying. They may need to for safety reasons, but not for OCD reasons per se. They could have other issues. So it's kind of a funny thing that we have to kind of understand the nature of OCD to understand the nature of a program that's going to help people with OCD. And that's that's another complexity in kind of I wouldn't call it a formula, but kind of our vision of how to actually treat OCD is mirrored in the way that we've created not only just the evidence-based strategies, but the philosophy of treatment, the idea about it, the comprehensive nature of it, knowing that OCD is way more than just the symptoms per se, and that you can't just say we'll treat this symptom, we'll treat that symptom, but there's something emergent from all of those symptoms that's much bigger than all of that altogether that we need to address, and we need to have the staff with the tools to address all of those things, and we need to have the right level of care, not too much, not too little, but for people who are on the one hand very, very capable, but also very, very severe. And both of those things, it's a paradox, but both of these things we find some of our patients, well, they can't get out of their room, but they're perfectly capable of doing a million other things. But when you see a medical patient who's really impaired, they can't do all of that stuff. And that's the difference in the world that we're dealing with, and why our treatment has to be responsive to that essential difference in what OCD and associated conditions are.
Yeah, really, really good points. And I want to take it even a bit more granular. So, like, to help people get an image in their mind. So, obviously, a lot of people who do therapy might be doing it online now since the pandemic. So they may not have been to a therapy room ever. And some may never get the chance or never want to go to sort of a more residential type treatment like your NBI Ranch. So describing both the sort of outpatient therapy room, if they were coming to see one of your clinicians, like what's the kind of general vibe of a therapy room at NBI, and then the ranch? What's
it's
the vibe
not a room. It's a room within a milieu. It's, we use that fancy word, milieu, meaning just kind of a therapeutic place. Okay, but the room is not, there's no room. It's not, there's not a border between the room. Yes, we do individual and people have privacy, but generally we're often all in the space together, clinicians, patients, sometimes even families, that we're sharing a space, we're sharing a life, we're creating the the essence of OCD treatment and all of the different actions and reactions that we give throughout the day. So for people who are partial hospitalization level or partial hospitalization plus residential at NBI Ranch, it's kind of a living lab for them to work on all of the different issues that OCD brings to life. So we say we want to bring life to treatment and treatment to life. So you can't just do that in a room. A room is an important, that's an important part of it, to learn your skills. It could be in groups, it could be an individual. Sometimes it is online. Sometimes that's very, very useful. But having all of those tools at our disposal we think helps us create that special sauce for the level of complexity of the people that we're working with.
Stu, I think to me, the idea is every person needs a bit of a different type of care. And I think the idea that there is one care that is going to fit everyone, to me, is a mistake, right? I mean, it's a clinical mistake. Even on medicine, like if you look at our patients and the medications they're taking, there's an array of levels, doses, types, combinations, right? And otherwise, there would be just a thing. If you have OCD, you take A, B, C, and D, right? And that's not the case. So if you have an infection, you take this antibiotic, and for respiratory, you take this one, and for the others, you take that one. And if you're allergic to one, A, B, and C, there's maybe a D that you could take. This is not how we even medicate people with, OCD and related conditions. So why would we be able to do that in treatment, right? So that you need to do A, B, C, and D. So to me, I think that the conceptualization of what the person needs in order to get where they need to be needs to be thought out with them. So you need a plan. So, any company, if you're going to consult for any company, you're going to walk in and you just don't have like a general rule for everyone. You do A, B, C, D. You have to see where the people are, see what they're doing, be able to kind of understand what's going on, and then propose a plan, right? And I think that that's really what I love about care, is that care should be done that way. When you meet someone for the first time, you don't have like a protocol in your mind. Oh, I'm going to give you this exposure, that exposure. You actually listen to the person and like really discuss and really think about what that person needs in terms of your clinical recommendation. And then you talk to other people so then they can get perspectives as well. And then you hear the families. One thing that I feel that sometimes we clinicians make a mistake is that we're proposing something without hearing what the family is going through and what they need and where they at as themselves, right? Because they need to go through an evolution of care as well. So to me, like, if we've done so many intensive cases remote, like outside, during COVID more than anything. And now hopefully with Psych Pack, a lot of us are licensed psychologists. Our clinic, we have a heavy group of licensed psychologists. And so it really narrows down where we can work. And I don't know in the UK, but in the US, you're licensed based on state. So you're, and we are licensed in Florida. We happen to get licensed in different places because of this situation, which sounds crazy, right? Because it's the same requirements, the same tasks, the same thing. Yeah. But so there's something called Psych Pack right now, who is the ability to work across state lines if you're licensed. And, if you're board certified, it should be much easier, but it hasn't really been much easier, even for the people who became board certified. And so now we can actually go across state lines. But during COVID, we had this experience where for all of a sudden, we closed the residential and people were struggling. And then what do you do? So we, shift really quickly into providing that care remotely. And I have to tell you, I have some really beautiful stories and people that I'm still in touch with that, it was 2 years later until we met them for the first time, And I'm not going to forget this. One of our patients came to see us, and we went from a pretty severe case that came out of the hospital, regular hospital, to intensive remote care, which was, in the past we'd be like, no, we can't do that. But it was COVID. We couldn't see the person, right? and I got to meet this person for the first time, and it was like really a moment. I probably will never forget the moment because it was so beautiful and it's so touching. I never had that where I never met the person in person, right? Our team never met that person. And it was like, literally, it was a reunion. It was so cute, to see. And the funny thing about it is the reaction of patients that you never met in person. So we're all sitting here, nobody knows your statute or anything, but I'm like really tall. No, I'm 5 feet tall, and so people didn't know that. And the funniest thing is their reaction to me being so tiny. This kid was like, "Oh my God, is that it? That's you!" Like, it was so cute. It was like, and I thought it was so adorable. Like, so I really enjoyed that experience of actually trying to adapt what we do to that environment where, we have done home visits and remote visits for many, many years. I actually lived in Utah for 2 years and did a lot of remote work as I was licensed and did all this remote work, but never to the point that you couldn't see the person, right? Like, there was no choice. And it taught us a lot. And I think I really believe that, like, that hybrid process and actually helping those who are severe that can't get out to start the relationship that way, and then give them enough tools to get out. It is a beautiful, way to do it. So I mean, I don't see NBI or other clinics not focusing on NBI, but there are many other clinics also that their job is not to do just a super residential, but also the people that are not just once a week therapy. So there is this whole world in between. So I have to say, like, the majority of our patients actually are not the residential and the super intensive. Those are the people that the clinicians are struggling to make a shift, and they come to us for like 12 weeks, 3 months, 2 months, and we kind of put the program together, the pressure, and then return them back to whoever they're working with. And those guys sometimes are staying at an Airbnb or at a hotel. And I know that that's the case for other programs as well, where their focus is not only like on the super, super severe, but they have the tools and the team to be able to create that first shift that they need in order for the patient to catch a little traction and move on.
Yeah. And then get the most out of weekly, whereas maybe they were struggling before.
Right. Yeah, almost like they needed that in order to go into their own process. Because, it's almost like you're stuck, right? If you're stuck and things are not moving, just getting unstuck and being able to move forward allows then the therapy to really build the skills, right? So there are some times that you need a little more pressure, almost like, I always like the analogy of a jar that you're trying to prop open, and sometimes you give it to someone to open, and then it's not so tight later on, and you could open yourself. So I like the model. I love the partnerships with the other clinics and the clinicians. So it's just, we do a lot of that. Like, I meet with all different clinics. We provide kind of peer supervision. I actually meet once a month with other women that are running. Sorry, John. Just gender stuff, but so we kind of got together a bunch of women that had to balance their family life, children, and running a clinic, and actually became this really wonderful support system to one another. And we really console, like, we really help each other in how to payroll, how to hire, what do you do? Because the problem with what we do is the patients are the most important thing. But in order to service them, you have to have a business that runs smoothly, a clinic that has processes and, that functions well. And that's the difficult part for all of us, I feel, right? So clinical is great for all of us that owns clinic, and we love it and we do. But in order to provide that clinical, there's scheduling and payroll and, benefits and doing, and that part becomes very difficult for most people to really run. It's really complex.
Yeah, I was going to ask that to both of you, actually, of like, you're both, well-established clinicians, and I'm sure you're pretty confident at that. But then, and obviously you've had many years of running NBI, but What was it like even historically and now, juggling between being a clinician and then being a business person?
Well, I think it's a really huge shift because as someone who's primarily a therapist and a clinician, we don't get any training in business at all or anything like that. So you're kind of learning as you're doing, and it's kind of like an afterthought. And I think it's very easy to underestimate how important it is to have the proper business structure to actually run a clinic. And you certainly couldn't run a clinic with multiple layers or anything like NBI without developing at least some business structure, business acumen. Katia has gone, and learned a lot about business and business structure. And I've kind of learned as we go along and just become more interesting because you realize that they're integrally related. I think I didn't say that word correctly, but they're just very well related, that if one's not functioning, the other can't function because you can't have a structure. Because either you have to really kind of settle for a very small structure with just kind of your typical clinician management, or you have a large structure that becomes chaotic or can't support itself or implodes. And that's the sad story of many clinics that try to do something exceptional. So you really need to pay attention to both, which is hard. Because and early in the transition, you have to kind of not just, you're going from being a player to being a player coach to being a coach to being a manager to maybe being someone who's kind of a little bit, working less, in the organization, working on the organization. And you have to really change your perspective that your client is not just the person that you're working with or the family you're working with, but it's the entire system that's working with them. So that's something that we're still in kind of transition with. It's interesting to speak today because last night we actually had a vision day where we all got together, had dinner together, and just talked about where we were over the years, where we are now, what we're hoping to accomplish, and why. What's our why at this point? Because again, as you grow much larger, you can lose the personal flavor that actually made you successful at doing this in the first place. Because you can't be too businessy, or you lose the thrust of what you really, the mission you're on. But if you only focus on the mission, that's a problem too. And I'm always reminded of like something that I've kind of studied, not particularly, I don't have any expertise in money, but the history of money, yes. And I remember reading that the original coins they're two-sided. One side is a secular symbol and the other side is a spiritual symbol. And it really has an inherent message in it that, that if you only pay attention to secular things, well, what's the meaning of anything? But if you only pay attention to things that are transcendent, that are spiritual, well, you might starve to death. And you have to really integrate both. And I think that's what we're attempting to do. And it's an ongoing project to actually bring both sides of the coin. Bring the business structure, bring the ability to hire people who are excellent at what they do, but also not lose the personal touch. And that's kind of an ongoing battle to not veer in too much in one direction or the other that we're currently engaged in.
I feel for people, clinicians who are trying to build their programs, and because like looking back, I actually did a little montage for John for his new role and new things, and kind of took a look at our history and pictures of 2011 2000 long ago of us already working on building and developing is. And I think that the difference is that if you have a clinic that is driven by administrators that are trying to create a program, they're really good at systems and delivery and calls and all that. But for me, a lot of times there's no really hard and clinical acumen to it, right? But at the same time, for us, it's all heart and all art and all acumen. It's it's like an artistic development. But then people will get so mad at you because all the other stuff, where's my schedule? What happened to this? What happened to, you didn't book this? All those business things, it's so not what we are, because we want to be, right? But our heart is on the clinical. So then, what do you do? Like, how do you balance? And then, my, the experience has been that if you try to hire someone who is a business person, they want to change everything and make it a business, and it makes about the bottom line and the money. And if you don't want that, and you want to stay on the clinical, and that the business is a consequence of the work you do, it's very hard to make it a really good, like, running machine. So you're caught in between that, being the artist and being the corporate, right? Like, the artist and the corporate is a clash. Like, it's a power struggle, and I think we struggle with that a lot. I think that I've done a lot of trainings and learned about businesses, but I can't really adapt all of that to our business, because the business has a different why and a different concept and a different move. And in many of the clinics that I know, and I'm speaking from like conversations and everything, the driving force is the clinical care and what happens to the patient. But they all are struggling with, like, do I pay salary? Do I give benefits? How do I manage my staff? How do I get a building? Like, how do I get, the rent or the purchase? How do I, all those, how do you do payroll? Everything is so difficult to put together. So you're running two things. You're running that whole business part, but then you're running a very complex clinical endeavor. And I find that to be the really challenging piece. So having a good balance where you do have a solid business to support the clinical is really, I think, the major goal for clinics right now. A lot of the clinics are run by corporate, and they have many places, and their hire is based on cost, not quality. And so I think that's, perhaps similar to a restaurant in a way, right? So a small restaurant makes this amazing food, but they have a paper check for you to pay, and they don't take credit cards, and you have to, like, adapt to that. Or you have this amazing corporation where in 2 seconds they make your food, but the food is not really what you want. So how do you find that balance, right?
Yeah,
I think a lot of it is really defining what success means. Success in a business might have certain metrics. It could be measured in number of cases, new cases, revenue, and all of those things. And success clinically, of course, is measured in people doing well. Not necessarily being satisfied, because who knows? Sometimes people have the best outcomes and they didn't like what they did, because of, especially in OCD, because it's going against your grain. And sometimes a therapist have to go against, I always say that people, they may not necessarily want the best thing. They're not looking for the best thing for themselves. They're looking for the yes for themselves. They're looking for something there. And we actually really struggle with this, like to find that balance of success where we're doing right by people, but the people are our patients, our families first and foremost, but they're also our staff. They're also our colleagues. They're also, just functioning, in a viable way. And this idea of success, it kind of, as you asked about how things have evolved, it has evolved in lots of different ways. It's going from kind of individual success to maybe success of a partnership, success of joint enterprises. And now it's kind of spreading success and trying to cultivate the success of all our staff who are generally newer in the field, and trying to cultivate their success, so that there's a line of connection. There's a through line of, I started working with people who were trained by the people who were pioneers in this, and they were pioneers in it. And what's the through line to us? We don't want it to get more dilute. We want it to improve. So all of these kind of, what does success really mean, is something that we're very conscious of and very careful to kind of keep it in the same place, so that we don't sway to one side where the business becomes the tail that wags the dog. But on the other hand, we don't ignore that the dog has to eat. I don't know if that's too weird, but that's kind of how we think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. A good business supports the clinical work, so you can help more people in a good way. If the business suffers, then you can't do the good work you do.
Yeah, and also I think that I would love to see a culture of collaboration versus competition.
Mm-hmm.
You know, literally, I don't believe that clinics that are doing this job are competing. They should be collaborating. There's so many people in need, and all of us have a little different lane that we work in. So it's just so nice when I share a lot of intellectual property with other clinics that are doing the same similar kind of work, and vice versa. And I don't feel like I'm like giving out the secrets. I mean, it shouldn't be that way, right? So, if you look at, historically, clinicians were very competitive because of the setup of how clinics are set up, so a lot of clinics are set up where, you work for the clinic and you get paid based on the number of patients you see. And then, the clinic takes a piece, you take a piece, which is shouldn't be done that way. And I think that for us who never believed in that model and wanted all our clinicians and all our staff to be, compensated regardless of how many people they saw and what they did, but compensated based on the job, a great job and doing a good job. It is a very difficult endeavor. And I feel that makes a big difference in terms of like collaborating inside of the group. Like we're all like not competing, we're collaborating. And I think that spreads to the culture of clinicians, which is collaboration really grows the care and improves the care. And so, I really do believe that if we can create a collaborative effort all over, it will improve quality of care for all. I mean, look, I love open source databases. I believe in that. I love when a hospital says, hey, this is the data of my cancer patients. Who wants to study this? So I think that that's the model that we should look at is data, open sources and really collaboration, because there's enough people suffering that are not getting the care because there's so many gaps in treatment, So when someone calls us and either we are full or we are not a good fit for them or they need something different, it's wonderful to know other places that they could get help from. And I think I struggle with that a lot is kind of like that culture of collaboration versus, people who may look at it as individual people, clinicians, but we're not individual. We are a part of a community. And I would love that to be really how the sausage is made, based on a community based, as opposed to individually. I think that the individual situation, although very, and I'm going to say like culturally appropriate for corporate in America, and, I'm winning, you're losing kind of a thing. It's not a zero-sum game here. And I think that together we will do much better. And I would love to see that happening. So I would love for all of us to, through IOCDF, right, the foundation, we have that hub. But I would love us to become more of a consortium as opposed to different little people, little clinics, little, our clinic is little compared to others, but we all have a role in this. And so I'd love to see that collaboration.
And the other part of collaboration we want to bring in, just going back to kind of the making of the sausage, is that it's more of a test kitchen. And the people who come there really are part of it too. It's the families, the people with lived experience. And I think this spirit of collaboration, of course, you can, with everything that we're talking about, like just a good recipe in a good restaurant, it has to be kind of in a balance. You have to get the food out. You can't spend 9 hours making each dish, but it has to, you have to kind of listen to what people want. You don't want to become like Restaurant Impossible, that nobody can function at, or, have it just kind of driven by ego, or we know best, or be top down. We want to hear what people are saying all the time. And on the other hand, people often say things that are not very evidence-based. So we have to be able to have, well, we appreciate the fact you want to participate in the recipe, but we can't leave the food out that long, it's going to spoil. And we kind of keep having to have these, everywhere we look, these different dynamics that we have to juggle. We have to think about how to actually make the sausage. By the way, I wish we weren't talking about making sausage, but maybe making something different. But we went with that. but we're trying to really make something that, actually is digestible. It makes sense to people. It's actually high enough level that it's going to make a life-changing impact, but not so high that it's inaccessible and it can't make sense to anybody. So I think kind of the bottom line here, so to speak, is that we're trying to create something that actually works for people on many, many levels. That it works for the people providing the treatment, it works for the families, it works. And of course, that's not an easy thing to do all of these things in a way that people can access this treatment in terms of affordability, in terms of time. This is a very, very difficult process. But I think it's kind of an illusion that I think we have sometimes, that we understand that, you go for a heart transplant, it's a very, very big deal. I think it's part of the stigmatization and minimization of mental health issues that, hey, you'll go once a week and with these extremely complicated disorders and expect to get anywhere. These are big deal things. These are big time surgeries. You need the time, you need the effort, you need the involvement. You need to all be on board. You need a team. You need to have the training to do these things. But this all has to come together to produce whatever product we're trying to produce, whatever we want to call it the sources, but we'll just call it care. We're trying to call it a care plan that really this is what we're aiming for. It's very aspirational, but has a life-changing impact for people. And that's what we're all about.
Yeah. So thank you guys for going into this today. So is there anything else you wanted to bring up before we finish?
I think that for clinicians out there, trying to build their programs and start something, it's important to recognize that is a lifetime investment in yourself and in what you're going to do. And sometimes you get misperceived by people and it feels unjust. And, in your heart, you have a great intention and you're trying to do the right things. And, sometimes families misperceive your intentions, or, colleagues misperceive your intentions, but it's that way for anything that you do. Because what I notice at times is I see people discouraged and feeling this is impossible to do. And anytime you do, you get hit on the head and says people are like, what are you doing? But I do want to say that the future is in supporting each other. And I do believe that, clinics that have clinicians leading the pack, not administrators, but real clinicians, when you recognize the names of people who are there, who want to help, is so important. And I always want to say that, behavioral health right now has been focused as a great business just because after COVID, people think that that's where it is. So many clinics have been bought. Many people have been changing what they're doing because of it becomes the hot commodity. So we have to be very careful because we want to make sure that the places and what we are doing are still very true to clinical care. And not become just this, business that is corporate only and, all of that. So I think it's very important that we make that sausage, like we said, with the clinical first. And I promise you that if you take good care of your patients and we dedicate ourselves and have the really, real feeling for what we're doing clinically, everything else then is secondary, will come together. And but if what's driving the whole thing is the corporation, the bottom line and everything, I can't imagine how good the care could be, because the care has to be really care has to be cared for, and it needs to be looked at.
Yeah, good point.
So I just want to add that there could be a question like, why are we doing this? We have a reason other than we love working with you and being on OCD stories. And we think it's such a valuable experience for people. But we really want to be very transparent that, no matter where you get to in this field, no matter how many years of experience, it's always a work in progress. And we know from training people that they think, well, I have to know all of this right at once, or people know what they're doing. When in a restaurant, a highly skilled chef, it all looks like it's all prepared well. we want to just share that this is not an easy enterprise, and that if you're treating people, if you're going through this, we hope that awareness helps you. That we all, it's kind of like, we have our doubts just like anyone with OCD. We have our indecisiveness. We sometimes mirror it. We have our perfectionisms. We have our difficulty shifting or adapting to new ideas, just like anybody else. But just like we talk to our patients and families, the idea is to experience all of that and keep going and keep living life. And we're trying to live the life of an OCD clinic. And that's our essence. And we hope that by sharing this, we can have some, better understanding, not just with the community of patients that listen to this, that with our colleagues, with everyone going through. And we hope other people will share their experiences too, because this is not too often spoken about, what actually happens behind the scenes, because we just see what happens on the surface, like Katia was mentioning, like you see a show, you see something that you just see the end product, but this is what happens. This is what goes into it. And we hope our hearts are in it, our good intentions are in it. Doesn't always come out that way. Sometimes our dishes are very experimental, but we're trying, and that's our message.
Yeah, and I think the why also, Stu, I think that, as the generation of people that dedicated their life to OCD, we are, getting to, change our roles. It is important to encourage and inspire those who are starting right now and who are interested in the world of OCD or anxiety or behavioral health conditions. But it's really important that we talk about this openly, because I feel like there's not a lot of guidance, and I feel like, we didn't have much guidance, and it was very difficult. It took us 30 years to build a business and to work every day. And I have to say, like, John and I, John even more in terms of hours, used to work 7 days a week, seeing 12 patients a day, and worked for so many years in that way, to try to really hone that skill and master how to do this. And so, we want to encourage the new generation to dedicate themselves to this population, because we want this to outlive us. We want all the people that are coming behind us to really do even a better job, learn from our experience and elevate that experience. And our fear is that things are getting diluted, and that in the future, instead of being great, is going to be like this kind of like backwards, and things that really we have seen 20 years ago that didn't work are coming back as like, fads or something, and it's going to mess everything up. So that's the fear. And that's why we want to talk about it, is like, hey, we're very transparent about this. This is very hard, and it's but really think about it. Think about where we are now and move forward. Like politics, things could go backwards and things could get, messy. Don't let this get messy for the population that we service.
Good points. Well, look, thank you so much. I've personally found this interesting. In my career, I'd like to do something somewhat similar to you guys in the future. So who knows? I'm sure I'll revisit this episode as a master plan.
Excellent.
Yeah, I appreciate your time.
Thank you again.
Thank you for listening to this week's podcast. And thank you to our Patreons who helped make this episode possible. And if you would like to find out more about Patreon and the rewards and benefits, then there will be a link in the episode description. If you enjoy the OCD Stories podcast and would like to support us with a one-time tip/donation, please go to theocdstories.com/support. All tips, no matter how large or small, are greatly appreciated. Please subscribe and rate the show wherever you listen to the podcast. So thank you to NBI for supporting our work, and if you would like to find out more about their intensive outpatient services or the ranch, head to nbiwestern.com, or the link will be in the episode description. And quick disclaimer, guys, this podcast is not therapy. It is not a replacement for therapy. Please seek treatment from a trained professional. And until we speak, take care.